My goal and my hope is through talking about diversity recruitment, there you can leave away with some good insight on some things that maybe you can practice or maybe incorporate at your personal institution. So we'll start in just a few minutes. All right, so just for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and start. Welcome to Effective and Impactful Diversity Recruitment. My name is Leri Argueta, and I'm just going to present a little bit over about diversity recruitment that I've been doing here at the University of North Georgia, and probably share some strategies that you can potentially incorporate at your institution. So we'll go ahead and start. Let me go ahead and show you all my outline. And so this is what I hope to cover. I'm going to share a little bit about myself so that way, we can all kind of get a little familiar with me. Then we'll also kind of start off and we'll talk about like defining diversity. We want to be able to define it so that way we know how we want to have this conversation today. And then after we define diversity, we'll start digging in deeper into learning about the changing demographics of the state of Georgia. So currently, this is where I serve here and my institution is located. So we're going to look at the changing demographics, and then after that, segue into strategies, some helpful tips about doing diversity recruitment, and then ending it off with the Q&A and hopefully some conversations. If you look at the bottom of, I think, your little strip or your little channel, there should be a button for Q&A. Please, I encourage dialogue. Add your questions in there or any thoughts as well. Happy to have a conversation, even though we can't, see each other virtually. So my name is Leri Antonio Argueta. You actually pronounce my name, the real way to pronounce my name is Leri, but here in America, in English it's Leri. But I'm a first generation college graduate, so I was the first in my entire family to graduate from college here in the United States. I have Salvadorian, my family is from El Salvador, so I have Salvadorian origins. My parents migrated to the United States back in the late 1970s to escape the Civil War that was killing hundreds and thousands of lives back in El Salvador. So then they migrated their way to Los Angeles, where I was born. So I was born in LA, but I always tell everybody I only lived there until I was about 7. And then we moved to Georgia. So I was raised in Georgia. So Southern boy, pretty much in and out, but I still got my Cali roots. And I'm very proud of that as well. I think it's kind of made me very, unique and worldistic in some ways. I graduated from the University of West Georgia, where I was blessed to receive my bachelor's and my master's. I got my master's in public administration, also focusing a little bit more on educational leadership, because I knew that when I was in college that I wanted to have an impact and I wanted to do work in education. I just didn't know, to be honest with y'all, like looking at the journey to where I am today, I didn't think that I was going to end up in higher education. I just knew that education, impact, that's what I want to do. I wanted to change the game. So as soon as I graduated college, I spent a good couple of years working in nonprofits. So in total, I have 6 years working in nonprofit and higher education sectors. Before working at the University of North Georgia, I was interim associate director for an amazing nonprofit organization in Atlanta, where we got to help over thousands of first-generation students. I worked closely with 400 first-generation students in the state of Georgia, helping students, figure out the college application admissions process to then, succeeding and navigating the college experience, and then also helping students at the end, like when they were graduating, and figuring out like the next steps, like career-wise, and being able to help them navigate like chambers of commerce, networking events, so that way they can land jobs after they graduated. So really passionate, especially when it comes to first generation underrepresented students. That's where I spent a good chunk of my professional career. And then I segued into higher education, because one of the things that I realized in working in nonprofit was that my impact was like this, and I wanted to make a larger impact. So I remember one of my great mentors, she was the CEO of a nonprofit. She always kind of made the comment, like, we have to get into the beast, the belly of the beast to really make the impact. So I jumped into higher education. And currently I work as the Associate Director for Diversity Recruitment at the University of North Georgia. I lead a lot of our diversity recruitment initiatives, and also try to, and then we also have a diversity recruitment team here at UNG, and I try to be kind of like the spearhead on like figuring out like how do we transition into more of what our students want? How do we start implementing more diversity recruitment practices? And how do we recruit students to make our institution reflective of the global world and society that, pretty much that we're transforming into? So let's start off with the definition of diversity. Now, there are several different definitions of diversity out there, but I always go back to this definition because it resonates with me in so many levels. This is from Bowling Green State University, but they define definition as the recognition of intersecting identities and social hierarchies, particularly related to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, and socioeconomic status. When you really think about it, like diversity is all inclusive of everything. I think so many times we think of diversity and we only think of race or ethnicity, but it's so much more than that. And when you take diversity into higher education, like when I came into the game, I realized this is bigger than a lot of us think it is. Like, there's just so many things, like so many layers into diversity, that where do we start? So when I came to my institution, I was kind of like the first in my role to kind of like lead that charge and figure out like how do we move forward with diversity. And so this is the definition that I'll be going off when I'm throughout my presentation. So why is diversity important? Why does it matter, especially in higher education and even more specifically in undergraduate admissions? I mean, there's so many answers. I mean, you can look at from like being able to have access to underrepresented students, helping socioeconomic, low socioeconomic students, to get a foot into the way, to get a better education for a career afterwards. But if there's one thing I've learned being in higher education and like opening, like, I guess like broadening my horizon and seeing the big picture, is that ultimately diversity is important because it helps our students engage with other students of various different backgrounds while embracing cultural differences. What do I mean by this? If we are transforming into more of a global society, our students need to be able to have interactions with other fellow classmates that are representative of the world. So that way, that's how you learn. There's only so much you can learn from a textbook or watching from a documentary or seeing things from the news. It's better when you're able to connect with other classmates. I apologize for colleagues, but classmates, but connecting with other classmates that can able to help you broaden your own horizon about like how do you approach different people from different cultures, from different backgrounds. And my wife, she is a phenomenal teacher. She's been a teacher for 8 years in the K-12 system, and she works with ESOL. And she's always showed me all this data and everything. And research just shows that diversity improves a learning environment. Like when you're able to get so much different people in a room from different walks of life, so much can happen there. And that's the beauty of diversity. It is a magnificent thing that can really transcend a university and help our students to become global citizens, global people, right? And going back to that whole global part, our world is changing, and we're going to look at some data at this, specifically at the state of Georgia. And then the question really is, how are we preparing our students? When we think about admissions, sometimes we just think like our jobs is to just get students to the front door. No, like BS, in my opinion, because we play a bigger part in this role to be able to make sure that our students are successful once they enter our universities. We owe it to our students to make sure that they are successful. So that's the thing. How are we preparing our students, as college admissions? So let's look into Georgia. Spoiler alert, I am going to talk a lot about racial diversity. I wish I had time to talk about all of the different parts of diversity, but I feel like that could be its own conference within itself. So look, be tuned for my next presentation on that. So an artist by the name of Bob Dylan once wrote a song, said the times are changing, and boy, are they ever, especially here in the state of Georgia. I recently attended, not I would say if it is recently, but in 2018, I attended a diversity and inclusion summit, and it was facilitated by the University System of Georgia. And we were presented data regarding like the changing demographics in our state and in our universities and our public universities in the state of Georgia. And if you look at the graphs, you can see like this is just population wise in the state of Georgia. You can see that Georgia is changing. You know, my apologies. I've been trying to find data, more current data, and I'm a big nerd, so I'm going to find it, a policy nerd. So if anybody wants to see that data, let me know. I'll make sure I get that to you as well. But you can see from 2010 to 2017, our racial demographics is changing a lot. I mean, we're seeing like a decrease in people that self-identify as white. We're seeing a larger increase in people that and individuals that self-identify as Latino or Hispanic, and people that identify as our Asian communities. Our minoritized communities are growing, and we need to be ready for that. You know, because college, especially when we're thinking about predominantly white institutions, sometimes we get narrow-minded. We're like, let's just tell students about colleges and that's it. But the reality is that different groups require different information, and we have to tailor our stuff and make our stuff, our material, fit the needs of the communities that we're also trying to recruit. So you can see Georgia's changing. Now let's look at the university system of Georgia. Now this is enrollment per race, and this is for all public institutions in the state of Georgia from 2009 to 2018. And you can definitely see that we are evolving. Now, and look, you can see that we're decreasing the students that self-identify as white. You're seeing more of an increase, and again, with communities of Latinx, Asian community, multiracial students, and also with African Americans. Like you're seeing minoritized communities growing, and the majority of white students is starting to decrease. So that is a sign, and I'm pretty sure, and I can bet all the money I got, that if we look at like a current data, that number is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need to be able to adapt our practices to what is, you know, to the students that are enrolling into our institutions. And I'm a person of numbers. I like percentages, but then I also like to see it in a line graph to side where you can kind of see like separately like where we're at. But here you can see the numbers of students based on racial backgrounds, like where they're going. You can definitely see here in Georgia, Hispanic, Latino on the rise, and as well as students from Asian backgrounds, or students that identify as Asian. And then you can also go into looking at the data of multiracial students. You're also seeing an increase in students that also identify as multiracial. One thing that fascinated me, and when we were at this conference, at this summit, I was really intrigued to see that, like, okay, like that some colleges have like a checkbox for unknown, so that way students can apply like if they didn't know. And you're seeing a decrease in that, which is going to show us, and what the policy analyst told us at this summit was that students are now becoming more aware of what they identify with. So that's why you're seeing an increase in other racial backgrounds and a decrease in unknown. So just for those that are curious, you know, that want to know that as well. And then one other thing that they showed us at this summit that I think kind of paints a good picture when we're talking about diversity as well is the percentage of students that are Pell recipients and non-Pell recipients. And then they broke it down by race, and that plays a huge factor into as well. While I don't like to think that, you know, being a Pell recipient defines your socioeconomic status, it does indicate, like, you know, where your family financially is doing, you know, because, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, we want to look at the whole big picture. But it is a key indicator to let us know what, you know, what family backgrounds, like financially, how families are doing when students are coming to college. And if you notice, looking at these charts, there is a high percentage, and this was pulled for fall 2017, that African American students that self-identify as Black or African American or Hispanic or Latinx, there's high percentages of students that are Pell recipients as opposed to non-Pell recipients within their own race. And that tells me that there is a need, there's a financial need that we as institutions have to do to provide more funding for our students, because let's be real, let's be honest, let's look at all the data. Tuition's going up and some salaries are not going up. And some of our students, and again, let's continue being real and honest, some of our students, their financial backgrounds, like that's not changing. Like, you know, like take, for example, minimum wage, that hasn't really changed. So all that to say, there is a need to be able to provide our students with the resources that they need to be able to be successful and not solely wholly rely on like federal loans. So I share this just because like because when I think about diversity recruitment, you have to look at all this stuff. You have to look at the numbers. You have to look at the enrollments. You have to look at the state. And you also have to look at the financial backgrounds of students, like where they're coming from, their socioeconomic statuses, because that helps us to know like where our students are coming from, what are the needs, and how do we start tailoring our efforts to best meet our student needs. Also in this picture, I do love to look at graduation rates because again, you know, money talks and it does have huge influence on students. And you can see that students, you know, regardless of race, students that are Pell recipients, the graduation rates are it's a lot lower compared to the predecessors that are non-Pell recipients. So it's just something to just keep in the mind when I'm thinking about like financial need. Like, you know, when we're talking about diversity recruitment, like I try to promote scholarships as much because I want to be knowledgeable. I also like to be knowledgeable of the fact that like a lot of our students need that. They need to know like, what do we offer for them financially to be successful, because it plays a factor into their graduation, like, you know, and their success in college. Now, let's look at the big picture. I know I just shared a lot of data, I shared some graphs, and you're probably thinking about like, Larry, like what does this all mean? Well, Georgia is changing. Let's look at the big picture. I'm a part of this education policy fellowship, and we look at a lot of data in this fellowship, and we were presented these graphs from the Atlanta Regional Commission, where they forecasted what Metro Atlanta is going to look like. And Metro Atlanta is actually composed of 21 county. It's a 21 county region. And so as you can see right now, based in 2015, I mean, orange represents white, green represents Hispanic, blue represents Black African American, and teal represents others, which is people that self-identify as Asian, Pacific Islander, American Indian. Georgia in 2015, in Metro Atlanta, has a strong hold with people that identify as white, but they forecasted in 2050, and if you look at the graph on your right, it is evolving. I mean, it's going to be different. Like now you're talking about Latinos in Metro Atlanta, the population is going to double. You know, Asian communities are going to grow, African American communities are going to grow, and that white community and our majority students, or majority of the community that identify as white, is going to get smaller and smaller, because again, going back to the fact that we are evolving, our city, our state, our world is evolving, it's changing. So it's really time to start changing our practices, especially when we talk about diversity recruitment. And are we ready for that? When I started working here, it was just me, just hired one person as an assistant director at the time for diversity enrollment to try to figure out how do we move this forward. And then I realized that you can't do this alone. Like as admissions officers, like we cannot, like recruiters, it's nearly impossible to try to recruit and bring students in. Like you have to, when you do diversity recruitment, you have to have buy-in from different teams. We have to change our practices, involve different departments and teams within our offices to work together to really make this effective. You know, you're going to have to talk to your communications team. You're going to have your recruitment team involved. You got to get your retention people as well in the mix. The marketing teams, your PR, because you know, as we've seen, as things have evolved within the last few years, especially what's been going on in our world and in the media, that's important, because that also lets students know, like, you know, what's your university stance on what's going on, you know, in society. And so you want to, it's a collaboration. You got to get other people involved, and putting all the work on one person is ineffective. To be very effective, we have to change our practices and get other people to get involved and to really making diversity recruitment actually happen. So I work at the University of North Georgia. I want to just share some data before we kind of segue into some strategies. But as you can see in the map, our university, we're made up of 5 campuses, but we're one institution. We have campuses in Blue Ridge, Dahlonega, Cumming, Gainesville, and Oconee. For all my Georgia people, we are definitely OTP. So we are not in the perimeter. We are pretty much on the outside of the perimeter. And one thing I realized when I started working at UNG, I realized, okay, this is a very predominantly white institution. Let me look at the numbers. Like, let me see data, so that way it kind of helps guide the work that I'm going to be doing on the ground and in the field. And so we pulled data, the diversity enrollment data of our institution back from 2013. For those who don't know, I only went up to 2013 because Around 2012, 2013 is when, because UNG used to be, University of North Georgia used to be two universities and merged into one. Around that time, around 2013, that's when we started collecting data to represent all 5 campuses. And so I looked at 7 years worth of data. Now I got hired in 2019. One thing I realized when I started looking at this data was that you can see that, we are a very predominantly white institution. When you look at, the number of students that self-identify as white at our college, and it's starting to decrease little by little, but then you also see where we're growing. I was able to analyze and look at this and say, okay, we are growing significantly within our Latinx Hispanic communities. From 8.4 in 2013 to 2020, we've nearly doubled our students' representation. Our African American students, it's like, it's staying consistently, but it's up and down, it fluctuates. We are growing within our Asian community. Even though it's small, it's still growing at our institution. So this kind of shows me, like, I was able to then, like, take all this numbers and take all this data and start figuring out, like, where do we start putting in our efforts. And then I created a few strategies that we started in 2019 that honestly I feel like has been very effective, because just given where we're located and what we currently have to offer students. And so I'll go ahead and share a little bit about what we've been doing. So here are just some strategies that I recommend regarding diversity recruitment. I think that it's really good practice to really have tailored communication. Like, one thing that we started doing in our institution is that, like, for our inquiry cards, we started we have like a little checkbox to let students know, like, would you like to receive information in Spanish? We started doing that as an institution because we realized that our largest minoritized group at our institution are Latinx students. So we wanted to make sure that, like, we were also tailoring to the community at that point. And I remember when I first started, I think I was trying to get something in Spanish, and I had a colleague tell me, why are we doing this in Spanish? Shouldn't they already be speaking English? And I was like, ma'am, no, like, this is for the family. Like, part of doing diversity recruitment is also being intentional. It's meaningful. Like, we want to be able to also include family in it. So we know that, especially, there's a lot of research out there, and I'll share some sources at the end. There's a lot of research that shows that when you recruit Latinx students, you want to get the families involved. And particularly where our institution is located, we're in a very growing county where there's a lot of Latinx communities. So we chose to identify that community and enhance our communication plans. So, but one thing I will say is that before you start, like, asking students, like, would you like to receive this information? First, make sure that you have stuff ready to send. Don't ask and then try to scramble it. Like, you want to make sure that you're ready to send, click send. So just my recommendation there. And then sending emails to students of colors to be able to have contacts with colleagues that at your institution that kind of self-identify with them as well. Like, you want to be able to let students see themselves at the institution that you're trying to recruit, right? So, like, being able to incorporate, like, if you don't have, like, if your team right now, you don't have a lot of representation, being able to work with different other offices to be able to see, like, if they wouldn't mind, like, reaching out to students to kind of help your diversity recruitment. So that way students know that, like, I can connect with someone, that gets me or that either identifies like me. Now, but you also don't want to make it targeting and be like, hey, like, because you're different like X, you're getting this email from so-and-so that's X. When the pandemic first hit, my director and I, he asked me, he's like, hey, Leri, can you draft up an email? And we sent out an email to all students that applied to our institution that did not identify as white. And I just sent out an email from the heart. I just said, look, times are tough. I'm here for you. I see you. And if you need me, I'm here. Like, regardless if you're thinking about coming to UNG or not, like, well, I'd love to, I want you to be there, but I'm here for you during this time. And that's way more impactful than just saying, like, hey, I'm Leri, I'm Latino, like, how can I get you to UNG, right? Like, messaging is different. So you want to make sure your messaging is meaningful when you reach, especially when you're reaching out. I put tailored tours, but I also kind of put shadowing, and I'll explain what this is. Traditional tours, get students to come on campus, they see a tour guide, you go around the schools, see the buildings, things like that. That's great for the average student. But, like, again, we're talking about diversity recruitment. You want to start incorporating, you would like to start incorporating new tailored tours that meets the needs of our students. And so here at UNG, we started this when I first started working here, and it's called shadowing tours, where I partnered up with counselors in some of our serving counties and serving schools. And I asked counselors, like, if would your first generation students identified as first generation, would they like an in-depth tour of the university? Not like follow and do a tour. Like, do you think they would benefit from like actually sitting in a classroom, going to an event, eating in the cafeteria? And counselors like, heck yeah. And I thought to myself, like, heck yeah, me too, because I was first generation and I didn't have that. I did 3 college tours and I got lost on 2 of them, where I have to call my mom and say, Mom, come pick me up because I'm lost. Like, that's sometimes, like, tours can be overwhelming, and sometimes you don't get that full like scope of like what universities have to offer. So we incorporated shadowing tours, where students got to go into the classrooms. They also got to go attend an on-campus event, so that way they can see what the college experience is truly like. Because some students, like, I always like to reflect on myself and the students that I work with day in and day out. They might not have someone in their family that went to college, so this is all new to them. So it's very important that we tailor our stuff to really meet our, like, again, the needs of our students, to make sure that we're giving them all the information that they can, so that way they can be successful. Because it's not about getting them through the door. It's about getting them through the door and making sure that they're successful afterwards. All right. So, if right now you don't have a dedicated diversity recruitment team, if you're just starting, highly encourage incorporating or partnering up with your multicultural office or staff to be able to do these tours, because it really does go a long way for a lot of our students. And I give the best example with our front desk. We have one of our front desk workers. She just started at UNG this last year, and she was one of the students in my tours. And when she got hired and I walked into my office, I was like, and she was like, Mr. Larry? I was like, yeah. And she was like, I was on your tour, and because of that tour, I came to UNG. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's what we want, is that we want the tour to be able to help a student make the decision that's right and best for them. Some other strategies that I also recommend, and I think, so again, coming from nonprofit, I think that oftentimes gets overlooked, is creating and building meaningful partnerships with local and nearby community-based and nonprofit organizations. They go a long way, because they're like us. Like, most people don't realize this, but like, nonprofit organizations, they're on the ground just like we are as admissions officers and recruiters, trying to help students, talk to students, and see them where they're at. So it's really important to, incorporate them, build relationships, and find out what they need. Like, I've been doing workshops that are not even related to UNG. Like, I'll be like sponsored by UNG, but I do workshops talking about college 101, 2-year versus 4-year, breaking down the FAFSA, and talking about, like, what can you do in high school right now to be ready for college. And I even do the workshops for the parents. Like, it's so, and then I partner up with the nonprofit organization, so that way, we're getting the whole community involved. And it's just something that it really does make a lasting impact, and it increases your institution's commitment to diversity. Like, that's what people don't understand sometimes when we think about NPOs and CBOs, nonprofit organizations or community-based organizations. They have the buy-in of the people because they serve the people. We're the institutions. We should partner up with them, so that way we can show that we have a genuine interest and stake in our communities. So that's something I recommend. Another strategy would be to incorporate diversity in your marketing and your social media to celebrate diversity and inclusion. Highlight your organizations that you have on campus, highlight student leaders, highlight the diverse opportunities that your institution has, the faculty and staff. Many people, I feel like a lot of us kind of oversee this, but like, being able to highlight our faculty of color, and being able to, it helps students, because like, when I did proud West Georgia alumni. Why did I go to West Georgia? Like, ultimately, because I did a tour at, I'm not going to drop names of the other colleges. Let's just say some good schools in Georgia, but I ultimately chose West Georgia because what was a deciding factor for me was that I connected with one Black professor who ended up becoming my mentor. And the school, like, on my tour, I was fortunate enough that they made it a point for me to connect with them. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, we oversee the faculty side, but they also place so much impact into the work that we can do to recruit students as well. And here are just a list of a few nonprofits that We've gotten to partner up with Agape, the Gwinnett County Public Schools Community-Based Mentoring Program, and communities in schools. Like, you know, the list actually goes on more and more, just because like I really wanted to make sure that we build it on that as well. And then my last strategy is just, you know, to create some more programs for retention. You know, as we're talking about recruitment, I think it's just important for us to know that we also play a part in retention for our students. Like, it's not about getting them through the door, it's about getting them through the door and making sure that students are successful. So creating programs like first generation at midday, Spanish open houses, again, partnering up with multicultural offices. Like, these are things that you can do to best help and assist students of color as you're trying to recruit, you know, as you're trying to do diversity recruitment. And, you know, we haven't been able to touch this. Like, I'm actually excited because, you know, I've been blessed to now have an amazing team, and I just hired an incredible recruitment specialist who's going to help me guide this. And these are programs that we have in the works that we're already starting out to plan for next year as things start opening up, so that way we can help our students, because we can recruit all we want, but there has to be programming. We have to do something. We have to go that extra mile to help our students to be successful as well. So highly encourage it, because we want to make sure that they're successful after you know, we help them get into school. Some last few tips, some helpful tips. Just, you know, if you do events, host parents, goes a long way. I'm telling you, I feel like that's self-explanatory. Include the parents. That's just how you get buy-in, and, you know, they help, you know, with, you know, influences students' decision. Speaking from the heart and working at a predominantly white institution, be cautious for all my leaders that are listening and at your universities. Be cautious with overselling and giving false narratives. You know, you don't want to paint a false picture of what your institution has to offer. You want to be very real and honest with it, especially when you're doing diversity recruitment. Don't overwork or pressure your staff of color to create diversity program. I know and I'm glad to kind of see, like, there's more positions that are being created for diversity recruitment, but just being mindful that, like, diversity doesn't happen overnight. It's commitment, and it's consistency, and it's slow. It grows little by little, because unless you have things in place, then it's going to be hard to grow it. And I say that from my experience of working with different universities and also working at my institution. And then now going the extra mile. So these are things, sometimes I feel like we get siloed, where like we only stick to like what we do and what we know, but sometimes you have to go that extra mile. And my only suggestion, and I have a great team that always reminds me, just be careful of burnout. You know, it's great to go the extra mile and do more things, but it does take a lot out of you. But if you can, create a diversity action plan. We just wrapped up our retreat not too long ago, where we were able to plan next year's events on how we wanted to do diversity recruitment. It's like a 4-page document now of what we hope to accomplish. Hosting events where the communities are. Sometimes we want students to come to us, go the extra mile and go to the community and be able to do programming and events. Getting involved with retention efforts, because it kind of gives you an insight of like what students are struggling with now that you can help prevent when you're talking to students and share more information about. And create no programs. If you're noticing that there's a deficit in events for students of color or diversity initiatives or programming for students, then go that extra mile if you can to try to create something. If you're noticing that your institution is not doing it. And I give 2 good examples. Here at UNG, I was able to bring a Latino fraternity to the university within my first year, because I wanted to make sure that, I mean, it's growing, and and it's the first multicultural Greek organization at UNG. So that was huge. And then I also applied for a grant last year, and we were the first, we were the only public institution last year that won it, and it was in the Mexican continent. And now we offer, for our students of Mexican origin, we offer them a scholarship of up to $3,000, and we get like seven students to apply. Because at the time when I started, I realized that we only offer Latinx students 2 scholarships, and one of them is so niche, and then the other one's super general, and they both only offer between $500 to $1,000. That's nothing. It's a dent into what the expenses of colleges are. So, you know, if you have it in with you, go out the extra mile, try to apply for new grants, try to get that extra funding. But again, be cautious with burnout. And just my final thoughts. I know I was kind of rushing because I want to make sure I answer your questions towards the end. But diversity recruitment is meaningful work and should always be about the students. Oftentimes, I hear a lot about the business side, and I get it. Business, we money talks, numbers talk, and all that. But again, diversity is commitment and consistency. It doesn't happen overnight. We've grown by a few percentages every year, and I consider that a success because, like, I'm always the first to say, like, our institution is not there yet, but we're getting there. And the work that we're doing, we're talking about impact. We're transforming lives. We're transforming our institution. And so diversity recruitment has the opportunity to do just that if it's done in a very meaningful and intentional way. So I leave you all with that. Data has just ultimately shown us that demographics are changing. The question now is, how do we adapt and change our practices? Because if we don't, then I'm pretty sure another institution is going to come and take it, be able to recruit our students, and then we're going to be left behind. So that's just always my challenge to everyone, especially when we're talking about diversity. It's tough, it's hard, but it's something that needs to happen because it should have been happening. But here we are today, and we need to be able to meet our students where they're at. So those are just my final thoughts. And I now open the floor to questions and conversations. Okay, so and again, if you have questions, please add them in the Q&A. But first question I have right now that I see is, how do you tailor a tour to a specific audience without offending them, or by asking them to self-identify as first generation for which to register or attend? Very good question. To be honest with you, for the person that asked that question, I rely a lot on my relationships with counselors. So I let the counselors at the high schools, like when I did my shadowing tours, I let the high school counselors, I said, this tour is for first generation students. I created a flyer. I handled everything on my end to get current students to be like the shadowing guides or the tours. And then I let the high school counselors either identify students that they feel like that would benefit from this, or they would help promote it, because high school counselors have way stronger relationships with students than we will, and we will ever will, because they're in there day in and day out assisting students. So based on like what you're trying to do, how you want to go about recruiting students to be a part of a special program and a tour, I definitely recommend connecting with with the high school counselors in the area, so that way they can help you promote it as well. So that way, it comes off differently, from someone that's working closely with the students. Now, I also do want to keep in mind that, like, for example, like we also offer, like we're working on offering Spanish tours at our institution. And with that one, like, we're not saying like you have to be Latinx, right? Like, always kind of like a misconception that all Latinos speak Spanish. Like, there's other different races that speak Spanish as well. So we're offering Spanish tours, so that way it's open to anyone. So you can do Spanish tours instead of saying Latinx or Hispanic tours, like Spanish tours for different languages, first generation tours for students that self-identify as first generations. So those are always the safe ways to go about it. And then also connecting with offices of multicultural affairs to kind of help guide like the verbiage as well. I always get everything I send out, I always get it read before I send it, just so that way I make sure that it's culturally aware, like I'm culturally aware of making sure like what I'm doing. Second question, staffing for DEI outreach. Have you been successful in gathering student volunteers for this work, or is it mostly coordinated by your professional development staff? I wish I had a professional development staff. I've been successful. I think part of it too is like I've also had to win I've had to earn the trust of my students. I'm one of the very few Latinos in leadership at my institution. So like when I first started and before we started implementing some tours where I needed student volunteers or students of color current students of color to be part of some of the programs that I want to do, I went and sat in the MSA office and I got to know students, and I did listening tours, and I asked students questions like, what's your experience like here at the University of North Georgia? And I showed students that like I have a genuine interest. I'm not just an associate director. I'm not just like in my ivory tower. I'm here with you, and I'm trying to figure out how do we do this work together. So when it comes, I feel like the best way to get successful buy-in from student volunteers is first off, meet the students where they're at, show them that you're open to being vulnerable, and just letting them know that, like, sharing your vision, like what is it that you want to accomplish, and see if like they would be interested there. But I tried doing the whole like, let me send out an email through MSA and see if students responded. No one responded. And so that was when I started driving up to the different campuses and started like attending different diverse student club organizations, uh, their meetings, their afternoon meetings, to kind of sit in and see, like, so that way I can learn as well about like what they want and what they're doing. So that way it's easier for them to have a trust with me when I ask them to help volunteer. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? I know we are coming up in time. Oh, another question. With COVID this past year, did you face any challenges with diversity recruitment and virtual access? Yes, yes. And any tips that worked well? Yes. I mean, not being in the schools really affected us. I mean, currently right now, I tell my director all the time, it's not looking good for next year, like regarding like the number of applicants that we have for next year that are students of color. But we've been able to do more meaningful events this year. I can say, like, especially virtually, we've hosted virtual town halls when COVID first happened, and we sent it out to all students. We're like, hey, we want to host a town hall, and we just want to let y'all know what's going on, you know. And so for students that apply to our institution, and we had a huge turnout. I think at the highest we had like over 80 students log in on one night when it first happened. Then we started doing things as things started opening up little by little. We started with social distancing. We started doing events, but not at our institution. We started going to the communities because we knew that a lot of students still didn't feel comfortable, driving or leaving home. So we started going to the community, started doing events, like, small scale events. And those have been impactful because, we have an event called a Spanish event called Café con Leche. It's kind of like a Spanish open house, but we help students apply and also apply for scholarships at the same day, apply to our institution and apply to scholarships. And we only had 5 families show up, but those 5 families, those parents, they made sure that their kids applied to our schools and applied for our institutional scholarship. So there's sometimes like you have to be able to identify, like, well, how do you measure success, right? For me, that was a success, right? The fact that like the parents told me, like, thank you for doing this, right? That I drove 2 hours all the way up to really far North Georgia to be able to host events like this. And so, yeah, so those are some things but we face the same challenges like everyone else. It's a little challenging, but I mean, also, if you look at all the news and all the research out there, everyone's struggling, especially when it comes to diversity recruitment, because students of color are just going through a lot right now, job losses. I mean, it's just, the world is in a really crisis mode right now. So hopefully things will get better for all of us. Any other questions, or if I need to elaborate on anything else? Okay. Well, I just do want to leave you guys off. I'll leave everyone off with just a few things. I get a lot, right? So here's some recommendations for literature. I read a lot. I actually have like a little mini library right now. Like, I'm always in tune with trying to figure out, like, things that we can continue to do better. A lot of my practices I've gotten from books that I've read about diversity recruitment. So here are 2 books. Recruiting and Retaining a Diverse Student Body is one book that I would recommend. And for those that have high students of Latinx background, I would also recommend Becoming a Hispanic Serving Institution. It's another great book by Gina Ann Garcia, that talks about the deficits of institutions, and like, even if you're not a Hispanic serving institution, things that we can start doing now to start implementing to really serve our Latinx community. And if you would like recommendations of other books, please let me know. I'm always happy to share my list of books that I read. And I'm happy to connect after. Really excited to present today and also be a part of this conference. Here's my email, my phone number. I am free before 4:30 Monday through Friday because my wife is very strict on me, because after 4:30 I belong to my beautiful daughter every day. So you can catch me any day before 4:30, but I'm happy to connect with anyone after this session and continue on the conversation. Diversity recruitment is something beautiful. It's needed. It's really hard, especially like if your institution has not started like creating different programmings. But let's lean on each other. Like, you know, you're not in this alone. I want to be able to give so much props to I want to just give just two shout outs. But I was blessed enough to create this solid foundation of the work that we're doing up here. Because I'm Latino, and my previous director, my previous supervisor, he's currently right now the director at App State, Ethan Penland. Like, me and him work together. He's white, and I consider him a strong ally. We work to create a strong foundation, and then I've had the good fortune of working with another great colleague while she was here. Her name is Shelby Q. She was currently an assistant director at Georgia Tech, and we created this foundation, what we have now. So you're never alone in this. If you ever feel like you need resources, please contact out, and we can help create this. We can help change the narrative of higher ed and really do effective and impactful diversity recruitment. So I'll leave y'all with that. So I hope y'all enjoy the rest of the sessions, and I hope to connect with y'all soon. Take care now, and thank y'all for attending.